Welcome back to the most professional StarCraft 2 with the greatest player of all time in the red, the finisher. It's Serral, facing off against arguably the best Protoss player in the world. In the blue, it's MaxPax, a best of 5 Protoss versus Zerg showdown. Once again, these two top-tier players facing off. And once again, I'm asking you to appease the algorithm by smashing that like button. And maybe even subscribing. And Jimmy, what are we at? Just one more. It's not hard. 1,524 likes on this video, on this cast, and I'll cast another one. And I'll probably do it anyways. I don't know what else I'd do with my life. But thank you for watching. Hopefully, you've had a good day so far. And hopefully it's about to get just a little bit better than MaxPax if he doesn't scout these Zerglings early. MaxPax did not probe scout at all. He's calling Serral's bluff. Or at least he knows Serral, while an incredibly dangerous player in the late game, is remarkably consistent in the early one. He's not going to be coming across the map with a whole bunch of Zerglings. He's not going to be building an early Roach Warren. He's likely just going to sit back, defend, and try to slap down whatever you do early on. Kind of the quintessential Zerg strategy. Serral's definitely someone who would watch you drown in a tide of Zerglings that you saw coming, rather than someone who's going to sneak into your bedroom in the middle of the night with a bunch of queens and pop up. Though, some people will pay good money for that, so. Oracle on the way. We'll see how many Moracles he decides on. No energy recharge, at least yet, to start things off. Second Oracle and an obscenely quick third base. Okay, somewhat inappropriately quick third base. Somehow that's worse. Moving on, but getting the third base so even before a second gate at the neutral. He doesn't even wall off. MaxPax is going to cut so many corners with his build, it's just going to become a build circle at this point. But once again, calling any sort of bluff from Serral to build early Zerglings. He knows there's not going to be that early aggression. And with the energy recharge on Oracles, it's very hard to pull anything less committed than a full Queen all-in off. So, MaxPax will be getting his third base remarkably quick. He will be getting his Twilight and Forge behind. Now, Serral, of course, has his third base done. He's pumping out the drones. The Oracle's coming in from either side as the Queens, politely yet firmly, will ask them to leave by throwing knitting needles at them until their shields are gone and they feel uncomfortable with the situation. But now we see whether MaxPax is going to commit to the Blink Stalker regression that he's so well known for, or just some sort of light pressure. And it's an art form, keeping the Zerg busy. Managing the drone count is something both players are actively doing. Serral obviously wants to build as many drones as possible. He wants 80 drones and 4 bases, and not to build a single Zerg. MaxPax wants whatever slows that down as long as possible without cutting into his own economy. So he's building 4 more gates, but he's still building 3 probes at a time while chrono boosting from the third. So he's trying to have it both ways, and right now, it's looking just fine for him. He spots the 4th base from Serral. The Zerglings are chewing on the rocks at the center. He actually lights up both Oracles to deal with it, which seems a bit gratuitous here, a bit lazy. Probably could have gotten the same job done with one, but I do love the attention to detail, like having the Stalker all the way back in the wall, literally leaning back, looking very chill about it. He has 3 probes pumping out at once. The way he sets up his bases is something I think most Protoss need to copy the vast majority of the time. Creating as many small choke points as possible, not to completely wall off the base, but to kind of create this tower defense maze for Zerglings, Banelings, and occasionally more advanced units, but at the very least the most obvious ones. There's going to be Hydras on the way from Serral, skipping the Roaches entirely. The Roach Warren, Changeling shut down. Overseer, gonna go hide in the corner of the map and fly off into the orbital sunset. Does look amazing here. But here come the Stalker. Stasis wards at the back. Serral, 70 drones. MaxPax, 66. Full 3-base saturation and not a probe more. But a Templar Archives and a Robo on the way, indicating to us at least he has no interest in winning the game here, but instead getting as much of an economic and tech advantage as possible going into the next phase. But if he's able to kill off Serral's 4th base, which has already taken a lot of damage, Lucille, wake up! We need the transfuses! You've been sleeping so long, you should have plenty of energy. But Brenda, stop yelling in game 1. People are gonna freak out and make comments about it. Well, maybe they should. Maybe I like the attention. I don't... Sorry, Oh, the hatchery almost dead, injecting it optimistically with one of the queens. Then the Hydras and Lings filtering through, triggering some of the stasis wards. Muscular augments. Hydra speed is the first choice to be able to chase down these Blink Stalkers, but he didn't expect the stasis of the low ground, or at least wasn't quite prepared to pull back from it. And enough Zerglings are caught that Serral is unable to pursue. With the Hydra speed, which is especially beneficial off of creep, Serral is a real threat to these Stalkers. The stasis, the only thing keeping him at bay right now. But he has enough of them that it's pretty reliable. Already a Hive and Psionic Storm behind. Neither player sitting back and building up here, but instead covering for their progression of tech. And the Zergling still overrunning. A few more Stalkers going to be caught. But again, with all that energy on the Oracles. Oh, and Serral starting to chew through some of the Zealots, brings a few Hydralisks up to the north side. And the High Noon base looking like quite a target right now. The Stalker's actually backing up, potentially to deal with it. More Zerglings continuing forward. Some Hydras caught in the stasis, allowing the Stalkers to take an opportunity, but not really dealing with the counterattack to the north side, and the Hydras and Lings will rip right through it. Forces the cancel, just like it's StarCraft Ghost on that Nexus. And for now, MaxPax will be down on 3 bases, while Serral comfortably has 4, as well as going Lurkers and Hive, adding on another hatchery. Very interesting how this has progressed. Not just Protoss versus Zerg, but MaxPax versus Serral over the last few weeks. As this match from the Liu Cup. By the way, if you're watching this in the first day or two, you should check out the Grand Finals live if you got the opportunity. Though it is at vampire hours for most English-speaking citizens, but I'm a vampire myself, so I can't be one to judge. But thank you to the Liu Cup for sending the games. Make sure to stay tuned for the highlights. Always appreciate top-tier community tournaments. Thousands of dollars on the line. And of course, that's going to get these two to show us what they've developed even over the last few weeks. And right now, this Gateway army looking very scary, but he is on the creep. And there's a lot of Hydraling to deal with it. Serral's delayed the 4th, and he's working on Lurkers. But behind it, there is a fleet beacon on the way. And no more Stargates, which means effectively a rush to Mothership. Not particularly quick, but definitely not slow. Getting a Mothership started before the 10-minute mark, I have to assume so. Meanwhile, a huge legion of Zealots with 2 Templar and the blood of a few dozen Zerglings behind, as MaxPax clearly dropping the storms and another... Oh my! The Zerglings washed away in the tide of storms. 100 Zerglings in less than a minute, and 1 redacted unit. I actually have no idea what that is. Meanwhile, an Immortal, a Tempest, and a Mothership in production for MaxPax. And if that isn't a clear indicator that we're teching up, I don't know what is. Adrenal Glands is done for Serral. He only has +1 attack and +1 ranged attack. I don't know why melee defaulted to being the regular attack, but melee and ranged attack for Serral, +2 ground weapons. Both players prioritizing those attack upgrades. Because 1, armor doesn't work against spell casting like Storm, or to an extent Parasitic Bomb and Fungal. And also, armor upgrades don't scale. Weapon upgrades do. Now, not as relevant for the Zerglings, but armor always reduces damage from attacks by -1. Shields as well. Whereas weapons might be significantly more, especially in the case of Immortals, Tempests. Honestly, all Protoss units, I think, get at least a couple extra damage. And that's why it's the priority much of the time. I see that question a lot. Hopefully, that helps answer it. There are definitely some scenarios, I think... players are a bit stingy on the armor or even shield upgrades. But for the most part, it's all about getting the damage done as quick as possible, winning the first part of the fight so you can clean up in the second. But neither player has been able to fully clear things out here. And the Storms softening up so many of the Zerglings and just outright killing many more of them. But Serral again denying this location. MaxPax was able to secure the 3 o'clock base, made sure he had a 4th on the way. Both players near maxed out with almost nothing in the bag. Still brawling it out in the midfield, but now the mothership has arrived. And the ability to recall your units to the mothership, and then potentially recall away. Usually large maps favor Zerg, but once the mothership is on the field, and now that it's completely unyoinkable and a real DPS unit itself, it's a lot more questionable. Meanwhile, a fight to the south. Blinding Cloud. Stalkers getting eviscerated. Immortals kidnapped by the Vipers. And everything is ripped to shreds, I say. The Lurkers just slicing up the defenses. And MaxPax unable to drive them back. Which means Serral will fight to a relative stalemate to the north. He keeps the base from happening, but he's unable to press any further. But he wins a decisive victory to the south, while MaxPax is mostly looking the other way. And now, the Tempest will start shelling. The Spire is done, and now Serral is making his Spire great again. But without the Corruptors, the Tempest and Mothership almost have free reign. Yes, Hydras can shoot up. Should they? Well, if you're desperate, usually feels like the scenario. An active cloaking. There is an Overseer with the army, so always so diligent about it. But no Overlord speed yet, which means he might end up losing it. And we'll continue to have to respect that active cloak. All right, well, settle in. I hope you got your pizza rolls we talked about last time. As we're going to the late game. Serral putting up a Sporchard to the 9 o'clock base, building another round of Lurkers, clearly angling for the Corruptors and maybe even Broodlords. Meanwhile, MaxPax has his temp units, which are anything but temporary. The Tempest and the Templar. Some of the most expensive units for the Protoss and the most powerful when combined. Lurkers on the high ground, but an Oracle with it. Both sides with very fragile and effective spellcasters. The Vipers looking for an opportunity. Get over here! Pulls in a couple Tempests. Pulls another one, makes sure he gets a hold of it, but loses several Corruptors in the process. He simply doesn't have enough to deal with this right now. Meanwhile, Neural Parasite is on the way. The Mothership moving inconspicuously. Time Warp and Storms as well, but I think he's losing his observers to the Spore Crawlers, which is suboptimal, to say the least. Does not find an opportunity to break through. The Spore Crawlers more than enough for now. But the Tempest, MaxPax splitting up his key units between the Mothership and the rest of the Death Ball. Well, he has two powerful halves of an army, and you bring them together and they're deadly. But the threat of attacking on either side can be maintained as long as he has Mothership recall. So Serral cannot commit his army. You cannot recall Lurkers. Nidus, I guess, gets kind of close, but he doesn't have a Nidus network. He has no way to move across the map easily. So right now, MaxPax is keeping him centered, I guess, and making sure that Serral can't really commit to anything without potentially committing to either losing a base or getting his army jumped from another angle. It's a very difficult position for both sides, but MaxPax maintains the initiative while that Mothership is still floating around smugly. I was editorializing a bit, but I can't help but think the Mothership is, especially after the patch, a little extra smug. Okay, just saying. You're free to disagree, but you're also free to be wrong. Like and subscribe. Ultralisk Cavern on the way. As Serral potentially looking for that late game Ultra Swell. A risky move, but a potentially effective one. He doesn't even have a Baneling Nest either, so not going. He's just keeping his options open, but not exactly a 24-hour thing either. Without the Banelings, the Ultras can pretty easily be targeted down. Ultras being the only threat on the ground against the Templar is definitely not. You need to win with the first fight in that case. So I'd be surprised to see the Ultras without the addition of a Baneling Nest. But a Mothership recall to the center, bringing all the Tempests and Archons in. Gonna try to chew through the center base. It should be pretty obvious. I don't know if it was in vision, but the Tempest couldn't have flown here that quickly. So Serral now knows that the Mothership recall was used. A few Lurkers are making their... I assume those are Lurkers making their way up to the north side base, but Fungal catches some of the Tempest, holds them down, scratches the paint, or at least some of the shields. But you really need the Parasitic Bomb to combo with it to do some real damage. The Lurkers, though, finding an opportunity to slice through some of the probes. MaxPax actually has plenty of money in the bank right now, so not going to be too put out by this. But the fact that Serral was able to buy so much time, and now he knows the mothership recall is on... I'll expect one of us in the wreckage, brother. Guess the Protoss really didn't like that Templar. Full energy Templar? But sometimes, you just can't work with people. This isn't a team game. 9 Broodlords are on the way. Chitinous plating for the Ultras. +1 Carapace. Alongside chitinous plating and +3 melee attack. As well as +1 Carapace in the sky. For Serral. Meanwhile, +3 attack and +2 air weapons for MaxPax. He only has 1 observer in production. He has the money. I'm kind of surprised he's not at least building 1 or 2 upgrades at a time now, but... He's played several of these games that have gone into a total war of attrition with Serral. And, I think he's a bit reluctant to spend gas until he knows for sure that he wants to invest in something. Right now, Serral has lost 1,000 more gas. That can change incredibly quickly. They both are very, very careful with their expensive units. As MaxPax, the moment the infestors close the distance, he recalls. That was a mothership recall as well. The Queen's out in front. Oh, obliterated by a volley of Tempest shots. And the Broodlords under fire as well. 5 drones dead alongside this base. The Dorito-dusted Tempest shots with tectonic destabilizers doing terrible, terrible damage. A huge bonus to buildings. So able to get a lot done there. Changeling at the watchtower. And working on that bottom right corner base. But MaxPax taking it at all. Either player taking the corner bases may become an increasingly huge deal. As we're going fully into that war of attrition. Meanwhile, there is no mothership recall, but he does have the basic recall. Feedbacks, time warps on the infestors. I don't see a parasitic bomb, but there's still more storms on the corruptors. Many of the observers may be taken out. Falls back. Active cloaking. Tempest get another volley off. And wait, there's no anti-air. I'm not talking about 3 Hydras is not going to be enough. Right now, there are 0 corruptors, 2 corruptors, and 4 Hydras against 9 Tempests. That's nothing. All right. Serral ends up losing 10 corruptors, I think mostly in that fight, and he doesn't kill a single air unit. I'm not counting observers, I'm sorry. Meanwhile, working on the southern hatchery that evaded him before, but now the corruptors come out, knocks out a Viper, storms on the corruptors. And these corruptors well spread to deal with the storms. I think he's entirely out of Templar. A wave of Stalkers going to be warped in. The mothership may be taken down. Indeed she is. And this fight going a little better for Serral, but Immortals and Archons in the center of the map. Lurkers will have to move to engage. Both players really stretched to the limit right now, but look at the bank. 5,000 minerals, 4,000 gas for MaxPax. Serral, only 500 minerals left. And 1,500 gas. He still has some to mine. We're not quite in the bean counter phase of the game. We start clicking on gas geysers and trying to do math, which we're trying to avoid by playing video games, but anyways. +3 air weapons on the way for MaxPax. +2 flyer attack for Serral. I assume the Carapace will be behind it. Energy recharges and Oracle. Infestors once again joining up with the Broodlord. Somehow we always ended this composition, no matter what year it is. The Oracle's taken down. Revelation will keep tabs on the Corruptors. The Tempest not so good at taking down Corruptors very quickly, but the range is the real difference. Another ship is on the way. Immortals and Archons closing in the Lurkers. Somehow the Storm didn't hit any of those Lurkers. The animation on Storm is a little larger than the actual damage area. This is because people would feel really bad if it was smaller or about the same size. It's clearly an indicator. But sometimes you get little quirks like that. The same is true for pretty much all abilities in the game. Tempest looking for an opportunity. Unfortunately, unable to hire any SCV mercenaries to repair their units. Immortals really freaking out. A cozy corner for the rest of the Protoss ground army. And now, MaxPax clearly wants to keep up what he's doing. He doesn't know how much money Serral has in the bank. Serral is very good at making it seem like he can just rebuild the same army again and again. You don't know. MaxPax, for all he knows, Serral has more money in the bank. So that is why, even from our perspective, it's obvious that MaxPax has an advantage, and he should really try to keep the pressure on. Playing conservative and making sure he doesn't lose a core army full of gas here is clearly the priority, especially from someone who's lost these extreme late games to Serral before. But right now, MaxPax has that bottom right corner, and Serral just lost the 6 o'clock base, and he's unable to take the top left, which means Serral will have less mining throughout this, and right now he has less in the bank. Obviously, Serral's aware of the dire economic situation he's in, but that is no reason to be timid. The best opportunity here is to catch the Tempest or the Mothership or some combination out of position and pick it apart. He's slowly incrementing out the upgrades, but MaxPax has +1 air weapons, +1 shields on the way as well. So not slouching on it now as he slowly fills them in. Especially those shield upgrades, which also benefit buildings. 7,300 minerals, 4,200 gas. But Serral's building it up as well. They keep dancing back and forth. Serral's lost 10,000 more resources at this point. No. Yeah, and 2,000 of them gas. At number 2250 or 4,500. 2250 in each gas geyser. 4,500 for a full base of gas. If we get past that, well, in the center of the map, Stasis catches some of the infestors, but the Wombo combo with the parasitic bomb, the recall is far too late. MaxPax is routed. He gets a little bit too clumped up, a little bit too far out. And Serral will chop his army in half. Cloven in twain by the Zerg. The parasitic bomb fungal wombo combo. And some of the infestors, I think, end up being saved by stasis, where it's almost certain they would have been lost if they hadn't been in it. So Serral needs a couple more of those fights to turn it around entirely, but that certainly helped. Taking out 3,600 gas to 1,700. Serral's actually expanding. Both players trying to expand to the top left. There's a Dark Shrine and 6 more gateways on the way for MaxPax, clearly indicating that he wants to keep his options open. It's a very fine line to walk. The tightrope of Zerg is how much anti-air and how much anti-ground, as Corruptors obviously cannot counter the ground army. Broodlords are fine at it, but if you overcommit, you can't go back to Corruptors. Though, that seems like it'd be uncomfortable in the first place, but if Serral overbuilds Broodlords, then he just gets wiped out in the sky. But if he underbuilds anti-ground, then Archons and Storm will easily have more overwhelming power on him. The Zerglings, but the Zealots! A cinematic of Zealots with a slow warp in, which means they will actually be lost in the resources. Some of them get warped in eventually. Well, Serral is somehow... Well, MaxPax has enough money in the bank. He can max out again. I think he's kind of deciding where he wants to go with it. A single lurker working on that center base. A probe and a zealot tag teaming a burrowed Zergling. MaxPax now building 4 carriers, which, well, he wants to end this. Carriers are a rich man's unit. The Tempests are not very good at a prolonged fight, or actually are best in a prolonged fight. Exactly the opposite of what I said. All right, we got this. But the Tempest's so good at kind of surgically carving away parts of the Zerg when combined with the Oracle Revelation and just long-range engagements. but they don't really have the DPS in a straight-up fight. Whereas carriers, on the other hand, have some of the most, if not the most DPS of any unit in Protoss versus Zerg. Especially with these upgrades, once those interceptors are launched. Both players fighting over that top left corner. Somehow Serral has dragged out enough gas to almost even things up. His army is 8,700 minerals, 8,000 gas. Though he has no insurance that he can rebuild it again. MaxPax's army significantly less costly, though he has more in the bank. If Serral's allowed to mine that top left corner. And also he keeps denying the center with the Broodlords. There's still a lot of gas in those gas geysers. Going to try to intercept. One of the carriers is taken down, and very important, he spots the carrier at all. The Broodlords will just chew through the Nexus. The hatchery obliterated by the Tempest. Mothership recall is available. He's working in towards the 9 o'clock base, but there's barely any minerals and no gas at all left. If he gets rid of this location, it becomes a lot easier to drag the army out of position. This is the closest area to that top left corner. The mass Broodlord. How many Broodlords now? 12 of them. 19 Corruptors, 11 Lurkers, and 7 Infestors. Gonna go for it. Oh, he grabs a couple Tempests with Neural Parasite. Very good against the Tempests themselves. Feedback on the Viper. Looks like he got a Parasitic Bomb, though, mid-fight. Corruptor is going to be taken down, but as are the Tempests. Where are the carriers? They have yet to arrive. The cannons tried to help, but I think a lot of them got stuck in the Broodlings. And MaxPax now chasing down the Broodlords, the carriers and Mothership in the second phase of the fight. Time Warp gonna slow things down just a bit. Fungal's trying to hold it together. There's no Viper to follow up. The Corruptor's trying to move in, but now in deep autumn colors. MaxPax trying to take advantage of the situation, but he lost his entire complement of Tempests, and now he's building 5 more, so clearly he wanted them in the first place. And Serral takes at least a Pyrrhic victory, if not a slightly more meaningful one. We know how he has barely any gas left, but MaxPax can't be sure of that. And now moves forward with the Templar. Serral targets the high-energy Templar, but ends up getting pretty much all of them anyways. Just 1 remains, and the Broodlords are once again raining down in the center of the map. The anti-air is incredibly limited right now for MaxPax compared to what Serral has to bring to bear. MaxPax getting caught out yet again. And Serral just wait. He killed a Mothership! Why was the... Oh no! A disaster! MaxPax, a series of incredibly unfortunate events. He lost the Mothership, he lost the Tempest, he's lost the Templar. And if that happens again, he may very well lose the game. Revelation on the Broodlords. The Tempest count has regrown. He's back up to 5 and building 5 more, the Penta-Tempest production. And Serral has almost no income. Not that MaxPax is really raking it in right now either. Meanwhile, Storms to the north tries to get an Archon merge. It does not work out. Lurker's moving in. This base is worth dislodging if he can do it relatively cheaply. Getting rid of the cannons and shield batteries obviously will help. And he does so. In MaxPax, oh... He had such at least a solid position, but Serral, he shifted it dramatically. And now the army supply. A couple more Broodlords on the way. Serral closing in. He's got 197 supply. And he can barely rebuild anything. He's building 4 queens at a time. Queen, Infestor, Broodlord. And if he's able to mine from this top left base, he's more than even. I'd say Serral is ahead. I don't know how he does it. He doesn't make it look easy, but he certainly makes it look plausible. MaxPax has now ended up losing. At some point, Serral was down 2k, but now he's lost 1.5k less gas, which MaxPax getting caught out multiple times, now chewing his way through some of the lurkers. The Infestor Broodlord is in position. He doesn't have much creep spread to work with. Catches another group. Neural Parasite on several. Storms across the bow. And we'll take out most of the Infestors, but the Corruptor, a beautiful spread. I can't believe it's not butter. He's closing in. Is there an energy recharge on some of these Templar? He desperately needs it. It's off cooldown. MaxPax is down to 121 against 160 supply, but he still has money. He still has minerals. His gas is looking a lot dicier. The mothership and some stalkers on the other side of the map. Might be able to take out a mostly obsolete hatchery. Still there for production, but the minerals are long gone at this point. The army will be recalled out. Somehow the observer didn't get caught in it. And MaxPax is mining gas from the center, which still has several thousand left. And he has another 1,000 in the bottom right corner. But Serral has somehow brought this back to dead even. And his standing army, well, mostly either slithering or gliding or kind of undulating through. Not important. The Broodlords are taking down whatever tries to contest the top left. And MaxPax needs to contest the top left. Everything else is mostly irrelevant. He can't just outright lose his tech, obviously. At that point, it's kind of a non-issue. But if he doesn't make progress soon, Serral will have more income, more resources in total, and a better army. This can still very much go either way. A very tenuous position for both sides, but MaxPax, he needs to be incredibly careful, but not timid. Serral, all his drones up there. He has pretty much no resources anywhere else. Completely mined out. Might be able to kill just barely. Apparently plus wound carapace allows you to survive 3 Tempest shots with 1 HP, which is quite convenient for that Infestor in particular. But the Lurkers coming out of stasis. Takes out 1. Broodlords will rain down. Chips away at a Templar. But here comes Serral. There's no creep. The Queens can't really participate. Stasis blocks out some of the Broodlings, which they will time out in the stasis. One of the weird quirks of it. The Zerglings to the north. Neither player can rebuild. The pieces are on the board. Serral at 180 supply. MaxPax starting to lose his infrastructure. He's at 166. More Queens on the way. The Queen count. You couldn't finish the game in the big game. And where did that bring you? Back to me. Brenda, no speeches. All right, we've been over this. There's plenty of time. This game's like half an hour long. Stop being so meta. I'm always meta. I'm a queen. Sorry. I'm blacked out for a moment. The Zerglings and Zealots. The war may be fought with Templar and Infestors, but it brings us back to the Zerglings and Zealots at the end. Assuming it's the end. I have no way. But the Death Ball is moving in. Time warp on the Corruptors. One of the Oracles is wiped out of the sky. Stasis catches a couple Queens and an Infestor. MaxPax, the ground army, still looking quite strong. Catches 1 Templar. Obliterates a Queen. Another Fungal. Knocks out an Infestor. 1 Viper on the field. Parasitic Bomb on the Tempest. So important in this fight. The Broodlings are raining down. Damage across everything. The Templar are taking so much damage and dealing it out in turn. The Zealots underneath. But he must stop the Broodlords. And he really didn't do much to work into them. Zealots cannot jump high enough to take them down. The Tempests are not high enough in number to help out very much. But how much anti-air is left? 9 Corruptors, 11 Queens, and that number is dropping precipitously. 5 Void Rays on the way. Another Fungal. The Corruptor is going to try to take down the last Tempest. And if they're able to do so, the Broodlords will reign supreme in the skies and be able to wipe everything else out on the ground. He retreats back to his last base. The Oracle's in tow. The Queen's trying to stay right on the edge of the creep, which is as far out as it's ever been. Fluxbane's on the way for MaxPax, who is going to reach for the Void Rays at the last. The Nexus may fall. He needs to hold it together. There's no shields left. The Void Ray's on the way. He desperately wants to kill this Nexus. He will kill it for maybe the 5th time this game. The Zealot's moving in on top of the Lurkers. Yanks in. There goes the Viper. The Oracle's with the Revelation, but they don't hit all the Lurkers. And Serral's up 100 supply. He's survived. He's thrived. And he's turned it all around. MaxPax. It looked like he had it all, but Serral slowly but surely drained it away from him. An exhausting game. In MaxPax, a few mistakes compounding to the point where Serral was able to get enough income. He might not have been mining quickly, but it's not about who's quickest, it's about who's left. The Broodlord Infestor. And Queens. Never forget the Queens. In fact, the Queens may have been the most important part, but the Broodlord Infestor Queen composition at the end. MaxPax not finding an answer in time. Or maybe giving himself too long. Whichever sounds more profound. Serral survives. And game 1. I think the real turning point, the most dramatic turning point, was when the mothership was left out on her own. Obviously, losing a mothership is expensive. -400, -400. But the mothership is not just a meme, but an incredibly useful tool in the late game. And every time that mothership gets taken down or Serral's able to pin down the units without the recall, he's not going to slip. Every meaningful fight, a parasitic bomb fungal combo, some neural parasites to make things more difficult, just enough lurkers to zone out the ground army. He got an Ultralisk Cavern, he got the upgrades, he never used it. We never saw that big Lingbane swell to take out the ground army. Just the inevitable, inexorable Broodlords. And a remarkable amount of patience. I don't love this style, personally, but I gotta respect, on both sides, the level it requires and the constant attention to detail. MaxPax doing a great job of keeping up on the oracles, as well as keeping pressure on denying bases, and it was finally when he was unable to deny that last base, is when Serral finally made some progress. Well, that sets the tone, I think. Now, does MaxPax continue on that defensive style? Or does he change it up dramatically? Because, for one, this is a map where you can pretty easily deny the Natchery, as he already did, of course. And also, a map where a wide array of early shenanigans are plausible. We've seen Serral just outright die to Adept all-ins, Charizard all-ins. You're seeing a trend, but generally, early Protoss all-ins on this map are even more strong because it's so hard to cover all your bases against things like Warp Prisms or even just massed up Stargate units. So, we'll see. I expect MaxPax to try one of those plays, and it's up to Serral to figure out which one it's going to be. Is what the Overlord, I assume, is saying to the Stalker, as it survives one hit away. Perfectly calculated.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
I assume it'll be sent in at the exact perfect timing, or maybe even converted into an overseer. 4 Zerglings on the way across. And MaxPax gonna slap down quite an early Nexus yet again. Though a little bit later than the previous one. Oracle gliding into the natural, but seeing nothing of note. I guess that is of note itself, just a boring note. A robo behind for MaxPax. Maybe a mana build. As no Twilight Council. We'll see where he goes with it. But the robo, quite a split from the usual Blink +1. Though, wouldn't be surprised to see something like Charge Light Archon as the follow-up. The robo gives you the observers, and most importantly, access to the warp prism. Probably by far the most important. Serral hedging his bets yet again. He's got a lair and a roach warren on the way. There's the prism. Is MaxPax still mining gas? Yes. That means it's almost certainly going to be a Templar Archives. We go for a Shrine to Dark. Templar Archives. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Begins immediately. The Overlord actually going to be able to wander in. Will we get enough info here to figure out what he's dealing with? Charge begins on the Twilight Council. He's got 4 roaches in production. Serral at 60 drones. And just adding roaches now. Suspicious of something like an adept timing, I think. As he saw only the Twilight Council. I don't think he's spotted the Warp Prism yet either. And even if it isn't some sort of big Twilight all-in, having those roaches potentially can translate into some damage on the other side, but he's been hurt before by these early pressures. The thing is, with this many roaches, I don't think the Archons are going to get much done. Not a huge issue for MaxPax, though. He already has 66 probes and counting behind. The Warp Prism is spotted. Just going to work on the Overlord. The Queen's a little out of position to deal with it. And doesn't want to take too much damage early. Overlord speed is on the way. A very notable addition. Yes. As the Queen Chauffeur is in production. The German taxi build. Well, some version of it. To chauffeur the queens across the map. Packed in tight inside that Overlord. Well, I guess if it can fit an Ultralisk, it can fit 4 queens. Not with Karen in there, if you know what I mean. And here comes Serral. Charge is on the way. Multiple shield batteries. MaxPax knows what's coming. But can he hold it? He's not going to have Psystorm. But he will have the Prism and multiple Archons with which to juggle. Serral will have the Queens and the Overlord, which potentially can take down said Prism, but that is a lot of Zerg. No upgrades for either side. MaxPax is working on +1, but the Roaches just get into the natural, cut off by a force field. There's a couple Ravagers. We've arrived! The Queens pop out of the Overlord and begin the creep spread. At the bottom of the natural, going to make it a lot easier to maneuver and, of course, give access to transfuse. They break through, trying to take down the pylons. A force field comes through. Another Immortal about to complete. The Archon's doing a lot of damage to the Roach Ravager. Pulls back. Archon down. Wave of Corrosive Bile. Dodges away. Sentry obliterated. But the main power units are still in place. And now trying to break up to the high ground. The Immortal's in position. Juggles back. Right now, MaxPax might be a clown at the circus, but an incredibly talented one with all this incredible juggling. Meanwhile, Zealots warped in. The Queen's on the front line of things, transfusing what they can. 50 supply gap, but MaxPax is still holding on to his third. The second robotics facility is taken out with ease, but the main one on the high ground is still helping out. Roaches and Ravagers continue to press through, stretching MaxPax's defenses to the limit. But for now, they'll bend, but they will not break. More Zealots warped in. +1 is done. A very meaningful upgrade in this scenario, as it appears Serral realizes that MaxPax is likely to hold at this stage, though he may take some more damage in the process. 3 Immortals. Force Field jams some of the units in. Makes it that much more difficult. Transfuse on the Ravager. Immortals coming down. Charge lots on the front line. Queen obliterated. More Roaches and Ravagers. Corrosive Bile dodges to the side. Barrier triggered. Corrosive Bile wipes out a couple more sentries. Queen gets a bit ambitious and gets cut down for it. And MaxPax is slowly but surely closing the gap in supply and maintains a greater worker count as well. Serral baited into something of a ham-fisted Roach Ravager all-in. He still manages to navigate it deftly, but the Immortals becoming far too much to handle, though caught in a very awkward position at the natural. He's forced back up the ramp, juggles back with the Prism. The Roach Ravager will have some free time on the third as he can't easily close the distance on him. More charge lots coming in. A wave of Corrosive Bile knocking out the shield battery. Immortals juggled down. Charge lots closing the distance. He's off the creep that he still has at the natural. A few Zealots are cutting off the reinforcements. And Serral, after several minutes, will be driven back. 2.5 minutes, 55 Roaches, 33 Zealots. We're not done yet. Coming in for another round. Shotgun blast of Biles. Zealots out in front tanking the damage. Immortals. Barrier should be off cooldown. He should be able to engage this, and if he can crush this army, the MaxPax can just come across the map and potentially win the game. Immortals, Archons. Storm is on the way now, though maybe a bit premature. Another wave of Biles. Doesn't quite take down the shield battery. A whole bunch of Zealots up to the north side. And Serral is sending everything directly across the map, which means he'll have almost nothing at home to defend. But the Zealots coming back in. MaxPax afraid he... Oh, I think there was an Overlord. He definitely spotted these Zealots coming in. Now Serral has some tough decisions to make. Bringing the Overlords forward for some additional creep spread, or by accident, but we'll call it additional creep spread now. As MaxPax above 150 supply. Zealots engaged. The drones were pre-pulled, but into even more Zealots. Storm 2/3 of the way done. Full energy sentry making full use of it. Force fields lock him in against the Immortals, and the Immortal count looking incredibly high and healthy right now. The Warp Prism has done its job of juggling everything out of danger into optimum position to blast through these Roaches, and so far continuing to do so. Juggles back the Templar. 3 seconds on Storm, and it's completed. Now, with the Storm, MaxPax should be able to drive this back for good. Serral, only 55 drones. Only +1 attack. MaxPax, an ambitious 4th base, will be cancelled immediately. But the Immortal Archon, with any amount of Templar, is an existential threat. He's dragging them in. Where are the Storms? And finally coating the Roaches. Many of them bruised. He actually has Burrow in order to heal them up rather quickly. Helpful, but Serral facing severe diminishing returns against an army explicitly designed to deal with just this. Another few Zealots slip out to the north side. The only thing Serral has going for him is the ability to mine from more bases, which is more efficient. But MaxPax, the closer he gets to 200 supply, the closer he gets to a decisive victory. But Serral is keeping the pressure on, even with this mediocre army composition. He's using quantity like a quality all its own. The Immortals holding. The probes, where are you going? I have no idea what that was. MaxPax up to 160. Adding more and more Templar. The Ravagers zoning things out. The Warp Prism heading out. Tunneling Claws is on the way for Serral. Grasping at Claws for right now for anything he can get. But MaxPax now has a far better army. He burrows the drone. Oh, Corrosive Bile lands and actually kills off a Templar. Softens up a lot of the army. And stuff like that Serral desperately needs. 10 Immortals. Burrows the drones in the main. Quite a lot of utility. Zealots being warped in. Serral's still quite a nuisance, making those roaches live up to their names. But reinforcements. MaxPax now has the initiative. About even on supply, though Serral still has the army supply advantage. MaxPax's army is significantly more expensive, despite the supply, though. Roaches are good at putting as much as you can on the field, but they just don't age well. And if MaxPax has his way, not at all. Ground weapons level 3 about to complete for MaxPax. One Archon down, but the storms soften up many of the Ravagers. Another wave. Serral eats a couple storms, knocking out some of the roaches. Tunneling Claws is revealed with those shiny little horns on top of the roaches. The Immortals are closing in as Serral desperately tries to keep them at bay. A Tunneling Claws counter on the 4th base. MaxPax splitting his forces. Could be the game-winning move, or could be a disaster. Meanwhile, Zealots will zone things out. There was only one storm. The Immortals are on their own. Still doing quite well, but getting caught and killed, the roaches will box them in to some extent. But at the same time, an army to the top right corner will take down the hatchery. And most of Serral's advantage of money, and another wave of Zealots is warped in. The hatchery survives, but MaxPax has his 4th base up and running. He's had the income for pretty much the entire game at this point. And Serral has been unable to get anywhere past Roach Ravager. Tunneling Claws, yes, but that's going down and not up. 50 drones remain, which is simply not enough. The Blinkstalkers, Crosabao still raining down. But MaxPax halts. Serral. He dug himself out of quite a deficit before, but the unit composition. He had a shovel before. Now he has, I don't know, like a glove with holes in it. And the ground is hard and cold and full of Psystorm. And weird analogies that don't make any sense, but the storms all across everything. Apocalyptic. GG. Serral taps out, and MaxPax holds on to tie the series up 1-1. A devastating volley of storms finishes things off, but really the Warp Prism Micro, just perfect. If he had lost the Prism, I think he loses the game. But he made it look, definitely not easy. But Serral had so much knocking on the door, but MaxPax able to answer. So far, whoever's on defense in both of the games ends up taking the victory. A little more concise in game 2, but game 3, all tied up on ley lines. I think seeing just the Twilight Council really, maybe not baited, but encouraged Serral to try to hard counter MaxPax's clever attempt. Like, that Overlord living and getting in, but only seeing the Twilight, gave him just enough information to maybe make the wrong call on the mass roach style. Now, obviously, you do want roaches against Archons, but ideally, you're already heading towards lurkers or maybe even swarm hosts against that sort of style. Instead of getting stuck with... He almost made it work. All right, I think against pretty much any other Protoss, maybe even Hero, it would have worked. Especially with Hero's Warp Prism life expectancy. But MaxPax in his element with perfect micro. All tied up. Thank you again. I'm not sure if I mentioned it. I always try to. I usually fail, but it's the thought that counts. Well, not really, but the Leo Cup Grand Finals. Shout out to Saber and his organization for putting it on. A grassroots community effort. Always great to build your cybercore. Okay, thank you. Has had so many great games. Kind of spoiled for games in the last few weeks. Make sure to check out the Leo Cup, both if you're watching this, it's going to be over the next weekend. But if you're watching this in a year, just to see all the great games and why I have 10 million subscribers, well, there's more from the tournament you should check out as well. And I hope many more in the future. So thank you for liking and subscribing. Ling speed. Did MaxPax scout? Yeah, interesting. He's mixing up. He so far done the early probe scout in order to block the hatch on El Dorado, but skipped the probe scout entirely on ley lines and amygdala. I think the sheer rush distance is what's factoring in here. He knows Serral will take the hatchery in the low ground in a timely fashion if he's given the opportunity. It would shock me. I would be shocked. Like, actual shock if Serral went for like a 12 pool. One, he'd probably win the game. Outright. But two, he's not going to 12 pool. If there's a... Why would you play a 55% chance when you're pretty confident, like, at least an 80% chance in most forms of games? The longer the game goes on, for the most part, the better off Serral does. I think game one is a quite decisive one, where Serral was behind. He had a worse army. He had less bases. But MaxPax just couldn't quite close it out. I think some of that is just arguably too much respect for Serral. Just knowing how good he is with all the spellcasters, literally second to none. How many times has the Infestor gotten nerfed? And we're not going to blame Serral. We're just going to heavily imply it. But MaxPax not committing to an all-out attack. And eventually Serral just catching little victories and turning him into a big one. Oracle comes in. It's going to be a robo again out of MaxPax. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised to see the same cell. One, it's already worked, obviously. And two, having access to the Templar archives even earlier. It's the alternative to the Blink Stalker style. I think if Serral knew from the start of the game that this is what he was dealing with, he'd be much better off. Like, the key to Blink Stalkers is you're almost always going to be able to do pretty well. But rarely are you going to be able to do amazingly well. Like, the range of possible outcomes is relatively limited. Compared to something like Warp Prism Archon Charge Lock, which, if they're prepared for it, there's obviously a clear point of failure there. Where if the Warp Prism goes down, or just gets slapped down, you lose an Archon or two, you could just lose the game. But it also... No, get off my... So that was on you. Why are you blaming me? How is this my fault? Well, I need someone to blame. I need to dilute responsibility. Thank you for being honest. Why do I feel like you're being patronizing? Oh, did someone say Patreon in the description? Brenda, you've already used that. I could use it again, just like Patreon, every month. No, just... Sorry. I blacked out for a moment. That's bad today. Templar being warped and Archon's on the way. Though clearly spotted the Oracle going to be needed. He may actually lose one Archon. Decides not to test it. Not worth the risk. But now, very clear what he's dealing with. +1 melee Ling's on the way. Ling's definitely not the ideal counter to Archons, but it's a numbers game here. As the Warp Prism already getting hit. Queens will split to minimize the damage from those shock waves. Archon Splash is a finicky thing, where the closer you're jammed into each other, the more damage it does, but not in a very... You get a feel for it as Zerg, and that feel is very painful. Ugh. Oh, but the Zerglings get a surround on one of the Archons. A massive loss there, and he almost loses the Prism. May have to recall entirely. 3 drones dead to an Adept run by. And Serral's only at 64 drones right now, and he's building Overlord speed at a uncomfortably quick timing. So... Yeah. Psy Storm on the way. Second Robo. Immortals +1. We got +1 ranged attack. And the Queens, the Soul Stroll has begun. The Queens are marching across the map. As Serral's intent is to kill MaxPax. Ideally before Storm finishes, but clearly as soon as possible. And yet again, MaxPax will have to stand against the Zerg swarm. Where is the prism? Now here come the Overlords. Going to drop some creep along everything. Serral will have a massive army supply lead. He'll have the +1 melee lings. I don't know if that's better or worse. 4 charge lots on the other side of the map. Stasis catches some of the lings early. More cannons, more shield batteries. Storm is closing in. The Roach is in position to deal with it. Queen's out in front. Corrosive Bile starts off. And here come the Queens again. +1 ground weapons is done. The Cyber Core under fire, but Stalkers are clearly not the priority here. Psy Storm still 15 seconds out. He needs it yesterday, but it'll have to suffice. And now the Roaches and Ravagers are grinding through. The Templar warped in. Did he just make Archons with the Templar he was building energy on? How long on energy recharge? He has it available. Desperately needs it. Energy recharge. Storm on the Ravagers, but the Queens can help sew them back together. And the Immortals caught out to the side. Another Stasis going to catch some of the probes with it. Corrosive Bow almost knocks out one of the Oracles. I think the only Oracle on the field. But the Immortals are closing in from both sides. That Warp Prism over the top. Another Immortal's done. Has to retreat back into the third base mineral line. But MaxPax is losing probes during all this. Even if he holds, the economy isn't incredible right now. 32 probes. Has to juggle back. The Immortals coming in from the natural. But the Corrosive Bows continue to rain down in the mineral line. He's going to have to juggle everything out of the way. Immortals cut off to the right flank, but MaxPax is bleeding out in the natural. There are 2 Zerglings, 11 kills apiece. 2 Zerglings killed 22 probes. He may never financially recover from this. The kill-death ratio on those Zerglings, obscenely high. Oh no, MaxPax was so laser-focused on the micro at the front. I didn't notice it. MaxPax didn't notice it. Honestly, I'm not convinced Serral did either. But it got enough done. And with half the workers, half the bases, and far less than half the supply, I think Serral has improved on his attack. And this time around, it will be a killing blow. GG. Serral heads to match point. Wow. Those 2 Zerglings. MaxPax didn't know. Now, it's likely, the way it stood, that Serral could break through. But if MaxPax is able to get the probes away from the third and eventually clean it up, but he just had no economy to fall back to. There was no saving grace. There was barely any grace at all. Serral just punches through and takes game 3. Ultra low. Serral up 2-1. Early scout / block. Always a dual purpose with these probes. MaxPax. He played the same card again. And this time, well, this time around also he wasn't able to block the Netry. And this game as well. It was only on El Dorado where he was able to force Serral into that awkward position where you take the third base, and then you have all this shenanigans early with the Oracle and Adepts that can really exploit that social distancing. And again, the Storms eventually finished, but I think MaxPax kind of panic-merged Archons. Right before Storm finished, like 10 seconds, feeling like he needed them now rather than a Storm a little later. It's impossible to make, like, there's a huge amount of impossible calls to make in that sort of scenario. And they have to be made immediately. And there is something to be said for doing something now rather than hoping for something later. As a lot of the time, hoping for the best case scenario, well, just lets the perfect be the enemy of the good. It just feels like when Serral does those sort of all-ins, they hit so much harder. Dark will do them, and most of the time they either just win or lose. But Serral's, once again, the inevitable tide of Zerg. Just slowly rolling across. Like you're in a dream and can't run away. And the Zerglings are coming. In this case, the Queen's just trundling off a creep. Though the Overlord speed obviously helping out with that. Stargate on the way. Of course. Serral hunting the probe. Wants to take the triangle base. This is quite a defensive map. Not that that will necessarily stop any sort of Queen Roach all-in. We'll see if MaxPax is interested in taking that quick third yet again. Pulling back with the Zerglings. No attempt to sneak by this time. Oracle's on the way. God. We've seen so many matches between these two. We're watching in real time Serral figuring MaxPax out. And it feels like a combination of MaxPax not really changing up his strategies very much, and also feeling less confident as time goes on. Like, less confident in his builds or his micro. So, incredible micro. And that leading to even worse situations. It's hard not to be, even for the best players in the world. I feel like Clem, part of the reason for his success against Serral, and in general because of it, is once he started seeing Serral as a beatable opponent. Of course, he's definitely one of those players who was always competitive with him, but sometimes his nerves got the better of him. And nowadays, though, it's an upset if Serral wins that matchup. So, he's certainly gotten over that. Once you learn how to beat Serral, everyone else is amateur league. I'm sorry, literally everyone else, but... And MaxPax has never consistently reached that level. We had 2 or 3 series where Serral looked a little lost against him, but he's clearly adapted. I don't know if MaxPax needs to change up his strategy or his style, but it's now on him to figure it out. But assassinates a queen. Good start with the oracles. Twilight and Forge behind. We're going to be heavy on the Blink Stalkers yet again. Back to basics. Adept in an awkward position. Just enough Zerglings that the base itself is somewhat threatened. May get the pylon and get out. Indeed. So going to be passing 60 drones. +1. And... wow, actually getting 5 probes. The Oracle's forced to stick around. MaxPax's blink pretty severely delayed. He's making sure to build his gateways, but the fact that blink hasn't... he'll get there. Eventually we'll get there, but making sure to rebuild all the defenses and probes. He had to warp in a few more units. The little details are adding up here. Roaches on the way. He's committing to roaches before seeing anything. In fact, I think Serral's a little suspicious. As MaxPax hasn't done the Shady Bunch at all in this series. The, 4 to 6 Adept follow-up that many times you see at, the 5 or 6 minute mark, right after Warp Gate is finishing up. He has not tried that sort of awkward early mid-game Adept timing that, for a while, has been kind of a staple of Zerg versus Protoss. So I think Serral's a little suspicious of that. But he's got the Hydra Den done. though he's focused entirely on the roaches. There's the groove spines. Cancels the groove spines in favor of Hydra speed. So definitely take a note of that. Now MaxPax now moving across. Blink still pretty far off, though Serral can't know that for sure. Hydra Roach. An old composition, but it checks out. A little more unwieldy and easier to manage with Blink Stalkers, but at some point, the sheer weight of the Zerg may bear down on him. So looking for a counter, but enough Blink Stalkers here, but that things are getting concerning. At the natural as well. Some roaches to make sure it's not just Zerglings getting shut down at the door. And he gets in. He's gonna kill several probes. He forces more warp. No, where are you going with those probes? He's gonna lose so many probes. 7 probes, and the Hydras, without the Oracles in tow especially. Gonna try to bait him into several stasis. Another one gets triggered. Sells a 50 supply. And more probes. The Zerglings just keep getting in. MaxPax just falling apart. He had a great start in game 1. A solid defense in game 2, but he's down 50 supply. Storm may finish, but the attack will begin far beforehand. Stasis, few Zerglings. Stalkers blinking back out of the corrosive bow. Another stasis catches handful of lings, but the roaches and Hydras are still moving up. Hydra speed is very done. Hydra range is closing in, but he doesn't really need it. I think he saw another stasis there as well. Not sure if there are any Templar. Storm is done, but not a single Templar on the field. Corrosive Bow knocked out the stasis ward as Serral just goes from side to side and slaps Stalkers away at each angle. More roaches and Ravagers. Well, just roaches. But the Hydras and Lynx. MaxPax blinks up to the high ground, where the Hydras can close the distance and take out more. No Templar. A couple Zealots without charge. Another stasis attempted. Slapped down by Serral. And the Blink Stalkers just don't have the damage output. Serral would double the supply. Too much Zerg. As Serral overcomes MaxPax yet again. And this time with a scoreline of 3-1. A decisive victory for the finisher. He's figured it out. Which, for the rest of us Zergs, bodes a little concerningly. But Serral is back to being the man to beat for everyone but maybe one Frenchman. So, a decisive victory for Serral. Though a fun series, and I think quite a demonstration of all sorts of games. We saw the ultimate late game, and we saw a series of early pressure. But at the end of the day, here's the reason why he's the greatest of all time, and continues to maintain it. So hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully it made your day at least a little bit better. And if you got the means of motivation, be awesome to check out Patreon. Thank you to our mules for bringing in so many minerals. And thank you for watching, though. I hear liking and subscribing is still free, at least for now. Thank you to the Leo Cup and Saber for putting it on, or at least sending things along. And make sure to look forward to more from it. Maybe make some recommendations if you happen to see the games. But otherwise, just thank you for watching. Good luck. Have fun. I'll see you next time. Stay chill.